Mao Zedong, the founding father of the People's Republic of China, envisioned a new China. He sought to transform the nation into a socialist utopia. However, his ambition, fueled by radical ideology, led to a period of unprecedented terror and violence. This period, known as the Red Terror, left an indelible scar on China's history. Millions perished, and countless lives were irrevocably altered. The Red Terror was not a single event, but a series of campaigns spanning decades. It began in the 1920s during the Chinese Civil War. It reached its peak during the Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976. During this time, Mao used violence and fear to consolidate his power and eliminate dissent. Anyone deemed a threat to his vision, from intellectuals to farmers, became targets. The Red Terror was a time of immense suffering and loss. It is crucial to remember and understand this period to learn from the past and prevent similar tragedies in the future. In 1958, Mao launched the Great Leap Forward. This ambitious economic and social campaign aimed to rapidly transform China from an agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse. Communes were established, private land ownership was abolished, and peasants were forced to engage in backyard steel production. This utopian vision, however, quickly turned disastrous. The forced collectivization of agriculture led to widespread famine. Grain production plummeted as inexperienced farmers struggled to meet unrealistic quotas. Local officials, fearful of repercussions, often exaggerated harvest figures. This created a false impression of abundance while millions starved. The Great Leap Forward, instead of propelling China forward, resulted in one of the deadliest famines in human history. An estimated 30 to 45 million people perished from starvation and related diseases. The famine exposed the flaws in Mao's policies and the devastating consequences of his unchecked authority. The disaster was largely concealed from the outside world. In 1957, Mao launched the anti-rightist campaign. This movement aimed to purge intellectuals and critics who dared to question his policies. Initially, Mao encouraged open criticism under the 100 Flowers campaign. However, this brief period of openness was a ruse. Those who voiced dissent, many of whom were intellectuals, writers, and artists, were labeled as rightists. They were accused of counter-revolutionary activities and subjected to public humiliation, imprisonment, and forced labor. Universities were purged, and academic freedom was stifled. The anti-rightist campaign had a devastating impact on China's intellectual landscape. It silenced dissent and created a climate of fear. This period marked a turning point, pushing China towards a path of ideological conformity and suppressing critical thinking for years to come. The persecution of intellectuals left a void in academia, science, and the arts. In 1966, Mao unleashed the Cultural Revolution. This socio-political movement aimed to revitalize the revolution and purge China of bourgeois elements. At the forefront of this movement were the Red Guards, groups of fanatical students mobilized by Mao. The Red Guards, armed with Mao's Little Red Book, targeted anyone deemed insufficiently revolutionary. They attacked intellectuals, teachers, party officials, and even family members. They ransacked homes, destroyed cultural artifacts, and subjected their victims to public humiliation and violence. Schools were shut down, and education came to a standstill. The Red Guards, fueled by revolutionary zeal and Mao's rhetoric, unleashed a wave of chaos and violence. The Cultural Revolution, with the Red Guards as its enforcers, plunged China into a decade of turmoil and repression. Traditional values were overturned, and the social fabric of the nation was torn apart. The Red Terror extended its reach beyond individuals and institutions to target religious faith itself. Mao's ideology viewed religion as a form of superstition that needed to be eradicated. Places of worship, regardless of their denomination, became targets of destruction. Temples, churches, and mosques were ransacked and destroyed. Religious texts were burned, and religious leaders were persecuted. The destruction of religious sites was not merely symbolic. It aimed to dismantle the social and cultural fabric woven by faith over centuries. The Cultural Revolution witnessed a systematic effort to eradicate religion from Chinese society. This assault on faith left deep scars, severing communities from their spiritual roots. The destruction of religious sites represented a broader attack on cultural heritage and tradition. The consequences of this cultural cleansing continue to resonate in China today. Living under the Red Terror meant existing in a constant state of fear and suspicion. People were afraid to speak their minds, express their opinions, or even trust their neighbors. The threat of denunciation hung over everyone. Children were encouraged to report on their parents, and colleagues turned on each other. Conformity became a survival mechanism. People publicly praised Mao and his policies, even if they harbored private doubts. They participated in mass rallies and demonstrations, chanting slogans they might not have believed. This culture of fear and silence allowed the Red Terror to tighten its grip on society. The psychological toll of the Red Terror was immense. The constant fear, suspicion, and betrayal eroded trust and created a climate of paranoia. The legacy of this trauma continues to affect survivors and their families, impacting their mental health and social interactions. The Red Terror's impact extended far beyond physical violence, leaving deep psychological scars on a nation. The world's reaction to the Red Terror was a mixture of condemnation and silence. Some countries, particularly Western nations, openly criticized Mao's regime and the atrocities being committed. They condemned the human rights violations and the suppression of freedom. However, other nations, driven by political expediency or ideological sympathies, remained silent. The Cold War created a complex geopolitical landscape. Some countries were reluctant to alienate China, a major player on the world stage. The international community's response to the Red Terror was often muted and inconsistent. The divisions of the Cold War, coupled with a lack of access to information, hampered a unified response. This period highlights the challenges of addressing human rights violations on a global scale. The true scale of the Red Terror's human cost remains unknown. Estimates vary widely, but historians believe that tens of millions of people perished during this period. The victims were not just those who died from violence, starvation, or overwork, but also those who suffered imprisonment, torture, and the loss of their families, homes, and livelihoods. The Red Terror left behind a legacy of loss and trauma. Families were torn apart, and communities were shattered. The psychological scars of this period continue to affect survivors and their descendants. The Chinese government, while acknowledging the mistakes of the past, has been reluctant to fully confront the scale of the atrocities committed. The Red Terror serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of unchecked power and ideological extremism. The stories of the victims, often silenced or forgotten, deserve to be heard and remembered. Their experiences serve as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. The Red Terror continues to be a subject of intense historical debate and interpretation. Some historians argue that the atrocities committed during this period were an aberration, a deviation from the true path of communism. Others contend that the seeds of violence were inherent in Mao's ideology and his quest for absolute power. The Chinese government, while acknowledging the errors of the Cultural Revolution, has generally sought to downplay the scale of the violence and the responsibility of the Communist Party. This official narrative has been challenged by historians and survivors who seek a more accurate and nuanced understanding of this period. The Red Terror remains a sensitive topic in China today. Public discussion of this period is often restricted, and access to archival materials is limited. Despite these challenges, historians and researchers continue to uncover new information and perspectives, striving to shed light on this dark chapter in Chinese history. The legacy of the Red Terror continues to cast a long shadow over China. The trauma of this period remains deeply embedded in the national psyche. While China has undergone significant economic and social transformation in recent decades, the ghosts of the past linger. The Chinese government, wary of social unrest, has been reluctant to fully confront the legacy of the Red Terror or to allow for open discussion of this period. The absence of a comprehensive reckoning with the past has hindered the healing process for many survivors and their families. The Red Terror serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, ideological extremism, and the suppression of human rights. It is a reminder that the path to progress is paved with the lessons learned from past mistakes. Only by confronting the darkness of the past can a nation truly move forward into the light.